Insight enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt, who is also the Chief Innovation Officer of the American College of Cardiology. We are back in our respective places in Boston after being live on the Cape covering the Convergence Forum last week. Dr. Bhatt and I were delighted to be hanging out with the best and brightest in biotech, life sciences, and also what venture capital is betting on moving forward. It's an exciting time because digital health is a part of that. During each show, we talk with a guest about the latest in innovation in digital health, biotech, and healthcare, with a focus on the clinician and the patient and what we think will be game changers. As a reminder, all shows are live and recorded. You can find the old shows by following me on LinkedIn. It's kind of confusing, but that's why I've added it. Now it's my background. LinkedIn Live, old shows are here under me. And then also old shows, because Dr. Bhatt reminded me that we have something like 100 something old shows. And also old show, and we're working on getting that moved into an MP3 format. Okay. Old shows can also be found at the YouTube channel, a little bit more complicated, under Vanguard.Health, but they're there and we're working to aggregate them. We are live and interactive, meaning we love hearing from our audience. So please tell us where you're watching from. You can just type into the comments on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, and we can pop them up into the show. Tell us who you are, where you're watching from, what you're working on, and any questions that you have for our guest. Dr. Bhatt, what's going on? You've been talking. So we had the Convergence Forum, and then you talked at we had
the Convergence Forum, and then the theme at the AATS, the Thoracic Surgeons Conference, National Conference, was in fact innovation. And just incredible.
Even surgeons are innovating now.
Incredible through line. I mean, they have been innovating in, medicine and technology and new approaches and out of the box thinking since kind of the beginning of time. It was great to be able to see their thoughts on where we're going. I will tell you, yesterday, Malcolm Gladwell was their keynote speaker yesterday morning. And boy, I mean, if you haven't heard him speak live, it is quite an experience. But I want to read you a quote because I wrote down what he said.
Oh, okay.
And I need to share this with our audience really quickly.
Okay. He said, Tipping point.
Let's
reference the books just in case, like we have a younger audience watching.
Yes, I'm sorry. Malcolm Gladwell is the author who wrote Tipping Point. He wrote Outliers. The concept of 10,000 hours to be really good at something, that is Malcolm Gladwell. Oh. And so he infuses anything you think about when you think, how do I want to approach doing things differently, doing things better? Chances are somewhere in there is a flavor of, or, contribution from Malcolm Gladwell in your thinking. So with that, he said the following for all you innovators out there. Successful innovators are three things: creative, conscientious, and wait for it, disagreeable. They keep doing what they think is right, even if it challenges conventional wisdom. They keep doing what they think is right, even if it challenges conventional wisdom, with the underlying part that they are conscientious and creative, right? What a lovely concept. I did not realize there was a word for us and our audience, disagreeable. Who knew?
We are highlighting disagreeable as a positive trait now.
It is a positive trait. He also talked a lot about urgency and how we have to recognize that oftentimes the biggest changes happen and innovations both are created and then go to scale because the people who are framing them can truly express the sense of urgency. So it's a little bit different than just storytelling. Storytelling is, well, this is a real need. But storytelling with that sense of urgency, this is a real need, and this is why you need to invest in me now, change your infrastructure now, have a VP of digital at AllWays Health Partners now, right? I think those are the kind of things. So with that, I would love to hear Nick's thoughts on this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. Today we have Nick Dougherty with us, a good friend. He is, in fact, the Vice President of Digital at AllWays Health Partners. This is the health plan of Mass General Brigham. He has always helped to improve lives and think of better ways to do that, both for our patients and for the caregivers. And prior to AllWays, he actually had a startup that he sold to McKesson, which I did not realize. So we'll have to ask him about that as well for all the entrepreneurs in the audience. And has since helped entrepreneurs launch their companies as the co-founder of mass challenge health tech. His company was called Verbal Care, for those who may have heard of it. It was acquired in 2015, now part of the McKesson Corporation. So really excited to have him here. A few things just for housekeeping. One is the opinions that are stated here are those of the people on the show and not the companies for whom they work or with which they affiliate. And then in terms of looking ahead to new conferences, I think we'll probably dive in a little bit more at our next show. But importantly, next week is AI Med, the global summit. It is happening in San Francisco. Anthony Chang running it. Alexis May running it for, and perhaps we'll say. It's got a fantastic lineup. Daniel Kraft, who was just on our show a few weeks ago, is going to be one of the keynotes along with myself. And we're really excited to just be able to celebrate the champions of artificial intelligence, bring together industry and payers and entrepreneurs and tech and clinicians, and have really everybody in the same room. Again, just crossing silos. That's what every meeting has been about. I feel like since COVID, is crossing those silos and recognizing we can't do things alone. So AI Med, San Francisco, next week, starts the evening of the 24th, runs through the 26th. If you're in that area, please join us. If not, look for us online, but it should be a really great conference. Shall we bring Nick out? Nick Dougherty, VP of Digital at AllWays Health Partners.
Hello. Love the applause. Thank you. Much appreciated.
So excited to have you with us.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. I'm just seeing you all in person, but it's great to see you virtually.
You know, I will tell you for a moment, I was going to ask you where you're calling from because I'm not used to Boston looking like that, but Boston actually looks like that today.
It does look like it.
Yeah.
But I'm actually in Virginia right now. I'm visiting my in-laws. So, but I would try to replicate the environment back up north if that's the case. So.
That's fantastic. Good. So Nick, maybe for our audience who doesn't know you as well as we do, will you tell us a little bit about just your course, kind of what you studied, where you worked, and how you ended up being, a VP of digital at AllWays, and then we can, launch into how big AllWays is and what the focus is for digital there.
Yeah. So I'm a computer engineer and designer by background, and I got into healthcare by accident in many ways. So it was somewhat purposeful. So I could trace it all back to a metal album. So I recorded a metal album in high school. And
I'm sorry, I was not picturing that at all, Nick. I will trace it all back to a metal album is not what I saw coming. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what a metal album is. I'm sorry.
Like it's heavy metal, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah,
like Iron Maiden, Scorpion, like we're going all the way back. Like this is.
Okay, thank you for.
That's correct. So I'm a big fan of metal music. That is what I listen to when I am trying to deliver an amazing experience for our members and patients. And it makes me happy. So I can't describe why, it just does.
Okay.
But I recorded an album in high school as part of my senior project. And I took a gap year between high school and college. I was originally recruited to play lacrosse at Bates College in Maine. I was so excited to go there. But halfway through my sort of 3D animation and graphic design, like 9-month intensive program, I realized that, I want to do more with computers. I originally thought I was going to be a poli-sci econ major. And I looked at the course catalog at Bates, and at the time, there's basically nothing in computer science. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, this is not going to work. So I started looking at other programs. I applied a month and a half late to Boston University. I liked their program because their senior design program is property of the students. So whatever I created my senior year, I could turn into a company. That was like my objective.
Wonderful.
So I went to BU, it's College of Engineering. My senior project became Verbal Care, which then sort of brought me into this journey. And it was actually my second choice for a project. So my first choice was like an energy and smart lighting solution.
Oh, okay.
And I was the only person in my class to not get their first choice. So I got my second choice.
That's how you ended up with healthcare with us.
Yeah.
It was perhaps your second choice over energy and climate, but
it's like prom all over again.
It was basically like my criteria for selecting a senior project was like the the first was, can I turn it into a company? And the second was like, would it make the world better? And like, that was my criteria for selecting a project. And it was so I can draw my roots back to Mass General Hospital, where as a student, I called, it was Lunder 7, and asked, like, can I shadow? Here I am, I'm a student. Can I understand like what the patient experience is like? And the app was to help nonverbal stroke patients to be able to communicate. That was sort of the prompt for us, was design an iPad app to do that. And
I'm going to date you. Will you tell me in what year were you designing an iPad app to do that?
Yeah, that was 2011, 2012.
Right. Okay. So that's, I think, really important. That was in the beginning of when people were really starting to feel like that was something that we could all do to help each other. Right. And so this is at the beginning of that. That's great.
Yeah, that was the sort of that was the M Health era. So that was like very much in the early part of M Health, and when like meaningful use was like the big thing that everybody was talking about. And it was definitely like kind of predates digital health being kind of the dominant nomenclature.
Well, it's the precursor, if you will, to digital health, though. And you were there. I want to emphasize for a second how wonderful that Boston University's engineering program has a senior, thesis or program, if you will, where you build a company, right? How forward thinking of them to already have had that in place, because that's really, what made a lot of this happen for you. Yesterday, when we were at this AATS panel, Elazar Edelman, so he is a professor at MIT in medical engineering science. He's also a professor at Harvard Medical School and was one of my first mentors. And one of the things he commented on, we had a large panel talking about innovation, is how on that day we didn't have somebody from a school of science and engineering at the table on that panel. We had the FDA commissioner, we had the heads of Medtronic Edwards, we had the head of Cleveland Clinic, but we didn't have a school there. And I think you just make that point all the more over, which is we can start so early in really setting people on these careers and these courses, even if we were your second choice and climate and energy was your first, but still we'll take you and you've done great things. But so important, right? That the school is there and ready to support you. All right. So you take off with Verbal Care.
Yeah.
And they help you figure out how to become a CEO, or you kind of.
Well, I basically, I went to Mass Challenge as an entrepreneur. So we got accepted into Mass Challenge, and that was basically the trigger to leave our day jobs and do this full time. Okay. And that was like a crash course MBA. It was amazing. I got to just about like any CEO in the Boston area I could reach out to and have a 30-minute to an hour meeting with them and just have them download to me their decades of experience and wisdom, and then try to synthesize that into kind of my own approach on how I wanted to build a company. And I just cannot thank those people enough for being able to accelerate my own path and help us, really build what I felt was a really great company.
So let me pause for 1 second, because Nick, Jen, and I run the risk of being Boston centric, and we know that. For those who don't know what Mass Challenge is, who are listening from abroad, globally, other parts of the country, and since you're the co-founder of Mass Challenge Health Tech, will you take a moment right now to tell people what Mass Challenge is, how it was developed, and then maybe just go ahead and let them know a little bit about Mass Challenge Health Tech? This might be a good time to do that.
So it does kind of have a world stage. It is well known.
Yes. Okay. No, very true. Very true. However, we had somebody from Laos last week, so I feel like they may not have known about this. Laos may be, missing what Mass Challenge is.
Yeah, I mean, Mass Challenge hasn't been as well known as like YC or Techstars, and I think part of that is because of how they're structured. It's not a venture capital run organization. It doesn't have a massive marketing budget. It's a nonprofit. And its mission is to solve the world's massive challenges through entrepreneurship and innovation. So basically, if Mass Challenge is successful, we're solving massive challenges. And I think that their model is incredible. After 10 years, 86% of the companies that went through the program are still active or acquired.
Wow. 86% after 10 years.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
And they work with companies that are nonprofits, for-profits, big, small, bootstrapped companies, venture-backed companies. So they really can work on the full spectrum, because massive challenges may not have a massive market, but need to be solved. And not everything is venture backable, but a lot of things are. And the Boston program accelerated over 100 companies per year. So it's not like this is a small number. There's thousands of companies that have gone through the Mass Challenge programs throughout its history. So I was a big believer in Mass Challenge from my time going through it, because I experienced that love of that community firsthand. When I got the opportunity to help stand up the health tech program, that was really special. That was really special for me to have that opportunity. It felt like I could give back to the community that helped me, and try to support entrepreneurs and not having to experience the kind of pain and torment that I did as a founder as much as I could.
Yep. Which they still experience. So, if you're out there and you're a founder and you're having some pain and torment, look for friends, reach out to people, call Nick, right? Call Jen.
Yeah.
It's like a bonding experience.
It really is. So the innovation that we did around Mass Challenge Health Tech, I think for me always starts with, if we think about universal principles that you can bring into kind of any innovation practice, I'm a big believer in human-centered design and design thinking at the front end of sort of any project that you work on. And so my task joining in July of 2016 at Mass Challenge Health Tech was to launch the program, or applications for the program, in September. So I had from July to September to basically design the program, get the founding sponsors, and launch.
Yeah.
Which was fun. Like, I love that kind of tight schedule. Yeah. So I must have talked with over 100 entrepreneurs, partners, mentors, investors in the community, and had them just like rip us apart. What do you hate about Mass Challenge? What do you wish was better? Like, what are you looking for? Where are you struggling? And what we found is that there was a disconnect between the solutions and the people who needed those solutions, which is obvious. Yep. If you're in the space, everybody kind of recognizes it. And one of the things that we saw was a lot of these like larger organizations weren't very good at articulating what their challenges were, or identifying what those challenges were. And a lot of entrepreneurs weren't very good at finding who had those challenges within those organizations, and or budget or sort of operational capacity to implement it. So we wanted to look at addressing that challenge or that problem. So we built what we called a challenge-based model of acceleration, where our partners like Mass General Hospital, Brigham and Women's, Boston Children's Hospital, like payers, providers, the government, all MedTech companies. We had a lot of different types of stakeholders, about like 30 to 40 partners. We captured their top 5 strategic initiatives or challenges that they wanted to address, which they wanted to work on in the next fiscal year. And we used that as a source of truth to go out and source for startups. So the startups would apply to address the challenges, and we would then put the startups through the Mass Challenge sort of evidence-based, anti-bias evaluation framework. And so basically we would take the top companies that went through that evaluation framework and the top challenges and who could address those, and we facilitated a matchmaking process. And in the 5 years that I was there, we generated over 450 partnerships through that approach.
That's amazing.
And impacted millions of lives in the process. It was the program, that was everything that led up to the program, but the program itself, we helped the startups and their partners set goals and milestones and actually implement demonstration projects.
That's great. And if there are people out there right now, Nick, who are hearing about this and interested, they can just Google Mass Challenge Health Tech, and it's relatively straightforward how they can find their way to learning more.
I think so. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to hope so. If not, message us on LinkedIn or get to us or get directly to Nick, and we'll help you find your way. I want to be conscious of time, and I want to make sure to get to, there's a VP of digital in a health plan, in a massive health plan, AllWays Health Partners, that actually takes care of those who work in the healthcare field, right, at Mass General, Brigham, in all sorts of different ways. Looking at a VP of digital, how did that come about? What is your role, Nick? And what are your goals? What goals have you set for yourself over the next 12 to 18 months? Yes, it's a close time frame, but now I hear that you can do 3 months. So I feel less bad asking about 12 to 18 months. But tell us about the position, how it came about, and then kind of what you're thinking about doing with it for those who are watching and hoping to maybe even collaborate with you.
So as a health plan owned by a health system, what we want to do is try to integrate the experience as much as humanly possible. Because health plans will talk about, or payers will talk about the healthcare consumer as a member. Health systems will talk about that healthcare consumer as a patient. Mm-hmm. Patient, member, they're still the same human being. Mm-hmm. And navigating healthcare historically is complex, it's stressful, anxiety inducing. You often feel like your expectations aren't meeting reality. And so what attracted me to this opportunity was the chance to work in a place that really wants to build a unified, human-centered experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that to me is the opportunity within this role to bridge these connections between the health system and the health plan, deliver a more integrated and wonderful experience. And I know a lot of people want to start with their health system and with their physician relationship. They don't want to start with the payer relationship. So I think it's also understanding our place in that journey and being frictionless where it makes sense to be frictionless and being involved where it makes sense to be involved. And so our team engaged in we started with an end-to-end journey mapping exercise. Mm-hmm. Where we sought to understand the sort of the member perspective, so that human being's relationship with their health plan, and try to see where are the opportunities where we can really make a difference. And that's kind of where we're at in our journey today. There are some projects that we're working on right now, like single sign-on. So from a technical perspective, between AllWays and MGB.
That's a magical phrase. Single sign-on is really, I mean, how great would that be? Okay.
Yeah, so that's something that, I can sort of put out as a teaser for the next, 12 to 18 months is something that we're really focused on. But that to me is an example of how we're trying to think about integrated experience. Like, why should you have to have 2 logins, and why should this be difficult to transition between these different spaces when we're part of the same parent organization? So that's just a little snapshot.
So I want to say, Jen,
and I also missed this. When did Mass General Brigham start owning, start being a provider of healthcare? Sorry, when did they become a payer? Did I miss this totally?
Relatively recent.
Yeah, so several years ago, Mass General Brigham or partners acquired Neighborhood Health Plan, and the Neighborhood Health Plan was rebranded to AllWays.
So they moved into the payer space. Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's cool.
It is cool.
I want to say,
no, I like, where did this come from?
I want to say that recently we heard about, I wish Pavan Pant were watching, because I think he's the one who told us this, about where the 2-factor sign-on came from. Does anybody know the origin story of that? I can't remember. I'm going to remember it by the next show if we can't remember it today. Or if anybody knows, please put it in LinkedIn and we'll put you up on the screen. But it came from a very unlikely place that was not specifically directly related to this. And I wish I knew. So we're going to figure that out for you, because I think it's a good origin story. But one of the things I'm hearing there's been a lot of journey mapping. And there's been a lot of journey mapping in the past 10 years. And oftentimes we do this journey. So we do it when we build a new building. We do it when we have a new practice. We do it when we're thinking about team-based care, which has evolved over the past decade. So we got lots of journey maps going on. And then there's overlaying of journey maps. Let's see where this meets that. And we were talking about doing it last week. So you don't know. ER docs said I'm a patient for a journey map. That's not like, the journey map of the ER patient is like, I'm here. Please take care. Maybe if we had a preceding journey map, we would have less people saying I'm here, but that's a different story. But so joking aside, however, as we do that, right? And we then think about, I love your concept. You said, what are the 5 key things that all of your other people have in their strategy, right? That you're looking at, all of the different stakeholders, where are the overlapping points? I'm sure you're looking for those points in your journey map. But can you give an example, other than single sign-on, of when you say frictionless, boy, there is friction at every single step of engaging the healthcare system. And I say that, as a patient, right? So we identify them. I mean, I think most people could identify it for you. That's not the part that's rocket science. The rocket science part is, how are you going to address that, and how are you going to do it in a way where you can be effective? Because no friction point stands alone in healthcare. That friction point is part of this ladder, that is part of a pyramid, that is part of some sort of, balanced equation, right? And so there are a lot of layers to that one point. So there's 2 things. One is, how do you get to that point? Because there's a lot of people who might have other interests that don't want to change that point because it messes with them. And then the other thing is, how do you assess what that's going to affect if you do one thing, so you don't cause downstream issues? Or do you just tell people to expect it and then iterate? So is there any chance there's an example of a friction point that you would talk about? And you don't have to say, again, we speak for ourselves, not for our companies. I'll pre-state that. So Nick's just going to tell us his thoughts, but you're so thoughtful about this. Let's take an example before we end.
Yeah, so I'll start with the sort of the process, and then we'll get to the example. So you're right to highlight the friction points as a really critical part of the process. So a lot of times with journey mapping, you talk about the ideal journey, and sometimes people fail to look at the points of friction in between the steps on the journey that prevent you from reaching those different milestones. So typically what I'll do is I'll take the journey map, and then in between each point of the journey, capture what are the friction points or barriers, roadblocks that would prevent you from getting from one part of that journey to the next.
Yeah.
And then the layer beneath that is at each of those friction points, you identify what solutions or portfolios of solutions that could address those points of friction. As you mentioned, there's competing priorities, and there's capabilities, and there's roadmaps, and other people that have like what they're focused on. And so collaboration is a layer that sits on top of all of this. Like, you can't get anything done simply sitting in a theoretical space. So you have to transition out of that theoretical place into an applied place. And that requires collaboration. And there are frameworks that you can use to enable that collaboration to happen. So let's take like all of our different solutions out there on the table. There's exercises that we could use to force rank them in terms of the impact that they could have. You could force rank them based on the difficulty it would take to implement them, and or the complexity to implement them. And based on that, you can identify maybe a handful of things that you're going to get started on first. So typically what I'll look at is, where's the highest level of impact that you can deliver for that human being that you're trying to serve. And within your capabilities that exist today, how feasible is it for you to be able to implement it? How viable of a solution would that be sustainability wise long term? And then you also start to roadmap it to say, like, here's our future vision where we want to get to. That's the destination we want to reach. So like 2 Stephen Covey principles that I think about a lot in this context is begin with the end in mind. So that's kind of what the journey map helps you do. It's like helps you state where you want to get to, and then put first things first. And that's where those like prioritization frameworks really come in. Say, what is the first step that we're going to take? And it's important to begin with the end in mind so that you're stepping first in the right direction. So you asked about an example. And we wanted to identify an example where we as a health plan could have an impact. And so what we identified is a lot of people, whether they had our health plan or another health plan, this is an industry challenge, selecting a plan is super stressful.
Yes.
It's really complex. You kind of walk out of that selection being like, I hope I made the right selection, but you really feel like you have no idea whether or not you made the right choice. So a lot of the solutions that we hear from the industry is like, we just need to educate people more. And like, you don't need to have a PhD in healthcare to be able to select your health plan. We can do a better job than that. So I think that's an area that we're looking at. How can we deliver a more sort of personalized, navigated experience to help you select a plan? And a lot of that, frankly, is not very digital
Okay.
in terms of the solution. Like it might be digitally enabled, but that's an area that we're
So
really
that's a nice phrase you use, the word enabled. Let's use that just for a second. Oh, prescriptions that are digitally actionable and the improvement of health. Stephen Mullen, thank you. Expand on that, Stephen, if you want, okay, online. So I think let's just pause on that for a second. And when you figure it out, by the way, the health plan thing, if you could teach that to Medicare, that would be incredibly helpful to like 3/4 of this country, because that is, it's a place where we also have difficulty selecting things.
I always just assumed it was done on purpose. I was like, this was purposely made confusing.
I think that's true. And we're intelligent people, but we are seeing, right? But we are so affected by that. We're putting emotion on that, right? And it's just, or it's a thoughtlessness that the patient or member, whichever you want to call us, right, doesn't deserve an easier process, or it doesn't bother us that they don't have an easier process. So, but I guess let's just kind of zoom in on that for a second. You said that doesn't require digital. But does it really require me to fully understand everything? Is there not a way that I can be like healthcare plan enabled? We talk about being AI enabled, digitally enabled, right? I kind of want to be healthcare plan enabled. I don't want to sit and say, gee, we have like 3 different potential plans we can choose from. Here I am cross mapping and doing, and like, is there not? And even when I call human resources, God bless them, they're very helpful. I don't understand half what they're saying, because they do that for a profession and I don't per se have the time or interest. I just want somebody to look at me and tell me what's best. Shouldn't that be digitally enabled? Shouldn't there be a way that you look at me and my wishes and my diseases and you find and tell me this is the best for you and this is why?
This is a doctor talking to a computer science major, and he's thinking about how to explain this.
So I do think
he's like, how many things did I just map?
Well, I guess I'm going to walk back a little bit what I said.
Okay.
I do think that it is going to be digitally enabled, but it may not be like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a digital product per se. Like it doesn't need to be like a startup or something, and maybe it does. So what I'm talking about is initial hypothesis, because we haven't implemented this yet. So I wish that I was like 6 to 12 months in the future speaking retrospectively about what we did.
We are going to bring you back. You're coming back for the hot seat for that.
All right, sounds good. So the hypothesis is that a lot of people only get a very limited selection of plans to choose from, maybe like somewhere between like 2 and 3 plans. So we also need to stay within sort of I need to understand a little bit more about the regulations. So whatever we're going to implement has to be within sort of the regulatory guardrails or compliance guardrails. But I think that there's probably, my hypothesis is there's going to be a happy medium in there where we could do, and my initial thinking is that there's some kind of quiz that we can do to identify what's most important to you in your decision-making process. And we could use that to expose the parts of the plan that are going to be the most critical to you making your decision based on your preferences as an individual.
This is so exciting.
So
I may hold you to this, Nick, but I'm so excited.
Having more ease of picking your 3 choices of which plan A, B, C.
Especially since this is, in fact, my health plan. I'm going to be watching very closely.
So they put all of the employees on the health plan too?
Correct.
Yeah.
We have the option to be on the health plan. Correct.
Okay.
So you should participate in our user group. Let's go create it.
Wait, for me, because
I know I'm learning to say no and thank you. No,
okay, all right. Well, we'll at least run it by you. So I think that's the objective. Right?
That's great.
Is to try and do that.
Nick, we are at 12:37. Sorry to keep you over, but this has been fabulous. Oh, good. Stephen has more thoughts. As Stephen says, healthcare's consumer product is knowledge, drug and therapy.
That's true.
We digitize the drug knowledge with e-prescriptions, valid. We digitize the therapy knowledge with High-Tech Act's Meaningful Use Program. He'll have to tell us more about that. However, we convert this data back into an Stephen, I'm going to read this again. However, we convert this data back into an analog document called the After Visit Summary.
This is a love song for Ami Bhatt.
Tool provided to the patient to improve health. Stephen, you and I are going to have a conversation about this at our next meeting. The point is well taken. the way in which we interact with patients, and this is not about Nick or AllWays Health Partners, this is just about healthcare in general. The way in which we are trying to, or maybe not successfully creating health literacy is a problem, right? The way we meet people is in a very old-fashioned way. We've tried to update that from a piece of paper where you write the things you need and you give it to a patient, to now an after visit, summary after visit, which is like, here are the things you need to know. It is great that we have it. Don't get me wrong. It is sometimes printed, sometimes not. People sometimes understand it. It is in multiple languages now. That's a plus. But are there better ways? Right? But are there better ways? Exactly. Are there better ways to engage the patient and their loved ones in what is going on in their healthcare? And I think that is a topic. Jen, let's mark down kind of talking about health literacy. Yeah, health literacy and EHR. I think we should have a show on that in the future. And Stephen, we'll take suggestions from you as to people who might be good for that discussion. But I love that commentary. I don't know that that's directly directed at Nick, but I think it's a great point.
Important, not very exciting, but we can see who shows up.
Incredibly important. Are you going to make me bring a startup that day for this? I mean, there probably is one.
Is there a startup?
Like One Up Health or Redox or like any of these companies that are working on interoperability and open data kind of stuff would be great.
Stephen says he has a solution.
There we go. Excellent. Good, Stephen. All right. Well, so I think, Nick, let us give you final words. Thinking about digital health in the future moving forward. 2 key things. It doesn't have to be about AllWays. It doesn't have to be about, Mass Challenge Health Tech, but just for you, 2 things that you would love to see happen that you think are feasible in the next year to 2 years in the digital health arena.
Shoot, I was going to say feasible.
Because that's weird that you're here from a payer. I did not know that. This is how you
maybe with a payer lens then, or not.
No, but why are payers getting into digital health? Like they're fully moving into it. I get reports. Yeah. Like I have a report that I'm about to put out about this, and I'm like, where did this come from? Why? And some people have responded on the internet saying, because the incentives are aligned for payer providers, then that's where you have the most innovation.
Well, don't we think digital health is population health, though, to a degree, in which case payers should be interested? Sorry, Nick, that was for you, not for me. I'll stop talking.
Some of the arguments is that you can make way more innovative headway going through a payer provider versus direct to consumer, or versus just like having a one-off pharma type digital therapeutic. I don't know, because you're really going to the heart of what causes kind of the dysfunction altogether.
Yeah, I learned during my time at Verbal Care that if you don't have the incentives aligned, you will not be effective.
That's true.
Our solution at Verbal Care could literally give a voice to people who did not have one, but we could not scale our solution. Nobody would pay for it. We literally help people who are nonverbal, non-English speaking, to literally be able to reconnect in real time with the people that were caring for them. Mm-hmm. The nurses loved it, like speech language pathologists loved it, the patients loved it, but the system wouldn't buy it. When we became a workflow automation tool, and we could help you predict your HCAP scores, and we could do all these other things that optimized the business of healthcare, we got acquired.
Yeah,
right.
So healthcare to me is busted. And I felt like AllWays was well positioned to fix some of these underlying issues where what if we aligned incentives in a way that truly helped people live a healthier life? Because people expect their health plan to cover the things that they need to be healthier. They may not expect the health plan to be the mechanism that gets them healthier, like as their provider of care. But there are circumstances where they might, like, my gym reimbursement or my weight loss program or, the chronic condition management that I get through my payer, or my provider. I want that to be covered, or the digital tools that enable that. There may be, so I think of the payer as an enabler. The human beings that want care still think of their doctor. They don't say provider either. That's our word. they think of their doctor, or they think of their care team, or they think of their nurse, or any of the other clinicians that they work with. So our role in the digital space, to me, is to enable that human being and the people who care for them by making the process as frictionless as humanly possible, by being involved when it's appropriate and when they want us to be involved, and stepping away and empowering the people that they want to work with when that's appropriate. So it's kind of knowing when it's appropriate for us to be involved and when it's not, and letting the human beings we serve kind of dictate that. So you asked about like, what's my vision for it? And this is probably beyond the next year. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to answer it differently. I think that we need to build a model that's more of like, I don't know what the phrase is, but it's more like expectation-based care. And I think care should meet their expectations. And I'm not saying that the healthcare consumer is always right, but they're also not wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a combination of a human being's preferences and like who they are as an individual, and marrying that with evidence-based care to deliver like an ideal recommendation or solution for that individual. So let's say that the evidence says that going in person has 96% efficacy. Mm-hmm. And maybe the at-home equivalent is 90% efficacy. So if we're going to make an evidence-based decision, we might say you need to come into the clinic. Mm-hmm. You're going to have the best outcomes there. But if based on this person's preferences, their lifestyle, who they are, where they live, that evidence-based approach might not be the best solution for them. Mm-hmm. We might have better results with that 90% efficacy solution that could be administered at home. So how do we build a system that is influenced by the evidence, aware of the evidence, but also is aware of your individuality and what you're looking for to deliver the best solution for you as an individual? And conceptually, I can see how to implement it as an engineer, mm-hmm. and how to build that matchmaking algorithm. Mm-hmm. The challenge is going to be deconstructing these solutions into their sort of micro components to allow that algorithm to happen, mm-hmm. And allow that matchmaking to happen. So, is that going to happen this year? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's going to be like use cases. We're going to certainly try some. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I think to me, that is part of how we start to build trust again in an era where people don't trust institutions. And people deserve to be listened to and heard and seen for who they are and given appropriate, culturally competent care.
Nick, I think listening to you, people will redevelop trust in the healthcare system. This is fantastic. I couldn't think of ending the show a better way than what you just said. It points to what we started with before you even came on, which is that the silos in healthcare must go away because there never should have been silos in the first place. And that we're putting the patient at the center, which is where we all belong because we are all the patients. And I think we're going to get there. And I think organizations like yours and people like you who have been on the tough side of things, where you say, but I am doing something really important for these humans. And people say, we don't want it. And then you say, well, I can also do something for you. And they're like, okay, we'll buy it. Right. And it takes a little out of you when that happens. But then again, we live in a capitalistic society. We're unique here. We have a different healthcare system. And so we have to fight for things in a different way. Yeah, Charles Kirby, there you are, capitalism.
I think that's where, like, I want to add one more thing at the end. I know that we're way over time. So another Stephen Covey habit that's helpful here is think win-win. Yes. And I think a lot of people think win-lose. So we could have a system that improves operational efficiency and also deliver a better experience. Mm-hmm. But it requires more work. And a lot of people draw the line at like, oh, that's going to be hard. Yeah, so what? Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard. We are compensated to do hard work.
Yep.
Let's try to do the right thing. Let's try to create more win-win scenarios. And let's never sacrifice what's best for the human beings that we're here to serve.
That I also think, Nick, is where deconstructing is important, not only in getting us there, but in getting people to recognize it's hard to see. Not everybody can walk around like you and Dr. Joe and see how hard things are, but how we're going to get at the end. Some people just see how hard it's going to be along the way. and are tired and are having difficulty getting there. But when we deconstruct it, even to get people on board who need to make the change, it is easier to see, I will make this small change and that will enable this. And that is my part that I'm doing to make this bigger picture change. So I love the idea. Yes, there we go. Yeah, I'll be the other half with you. There we go. Excellent. Love this. Nick Dougherty, VP of Digital at AllWays Health Partners. Good friend. So excited to have you here. Anybody who's out there watching, please reach out. Nick is a really nice and easy guy to approach. And Nick, joking aside, I'm always happy to partner together on the work that you're doing. So do reach out, and we'd love to stay in touch and then bring you back a year from now and talk about what we tried and what worked and what needed iteration, right? Because it's win-win.
Absolutely.
In that sense too. We don't fail. We just find that we need to iterate or maybe change tax, and that's okay.
We just learn.
We learn.
Just learn.
That's right. Jen, final word to you.
Thanks to Nick. Thanks to Dr. Bhatt. And as always, thanks to our audience for watching as we share our insights and hope to work with you to make healthcare better. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care, y'all.